My name is Sue Donovan. I'm with RIPIN, and this evening we are having our third virtual community of practice. We'll be interviewing a panel. Our colleagues from Decoding Dyslexia RI will be with us, and our partners from the Rhode Island Department of Education will be here as well. We only have an hour together. This meeting is being recorded so that we will be able to view it for future views. We'll be able to see it, and we'll be sending it out to everyone that registered for this evening's webinar. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our friend Mary Spencer from the Rhode Island Department of Education. Mary, welcome.
Thank you, Sue. I really appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Spencer, and I am an education specialist in RIDE's Office of Student, Community, and Academic Supports. I am also the coordinator of the State Personnel Development Grant we fondly call SPDIG for short. The SPDIG is a federal grant funded by the United States Department of Education. Approximately 30 states participate in the grant. In Rhode Island, we focus on the science of reading and structured literacy within a multi-tiered systems of support framework. We have been working with RIPIN on this current grant since July 2021, and it is our profound pleasure to support and be engaged this evening with RIPIN and Decoding Dyslexia Rhode Island. Next slide, please. Our grant funds statewide professional development opportunities to enhance knowledge and skills in the science of reading and structured literacy for educators, early learning providers, administrators, university faculty, and more. Our partnership with RIPIN involves development of trainings and resources for parents and families, especially for those with children or youth with or at risk of disabilities. We also fund 25 school and district-based coaches to support their work improving school and district-based team effectiveness in implementing evidence-based literacy practices with students, especially those with disabilities. Finally, we work directly with Rhode Island universities to support their revision of programs in the area of literacy to train new and licensed teachers. Thank you all so much again for joining us. I now hand the mic off to my RIDE colleague, Trish Pora.
Hi, thank you, Mary. My name is Trish Pora. I am a literacy specialist at RIDE in the Office of Instruction, Assessment, and Curriculum. I just want to give you some background about policy and our transition to structured literacy. At this point, most of our districts have transitioned to high quality instructional materials and are providing professional learning for teachers and staff that align with structured literacy. At this point, 98% of our elementary schools have adopted high quality instructional materials, and 96% of both middle and high school are utilizing these high quality instructional materials. We are also working with districts, and districts are working to support teachers in professional learning around structured literacy and science of reading. And if they have not completed, they are in their final stages of completing either proficiency or awareness in structured literacy, science of reading.
Thank you, Trish. So our agenda for this evening, as I said, we have our colleagues from Decoding Dyslexia RI. We have a panel presentation for you this evening, and we will be covering supporting students with dyslexia. And at the end, we will have time for questions and answers. If questions come up during the course of the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get to all of them. So our lineup from RIPIN, we have Ann Fatura. Ann is our peer support manager for special education. Our guest from Decoding Dyslexia Rhode Island is Shannon Saglio. the president of DDRI, Lise Maloney, vice president, and Tori Jessup Crowley, director of policy and public outreach. You just met our friend Trish Pora, the literacy specialist from RIDE, and her colleague, Mary Spencer. Now I'd like to introduce Shannon.
Good evening, everyone. So we first want to start off with what is Decoding Dyslexia Rhode Island? So Decoding Dyslexia Rhode Island was found in March 2014 by Suzanne Arena and Tori Jessup Crowley, who's here tonight, and Carrie Curto were also part of that, the beginnings of DDRI. And DDRI is a part of a national parent-led grassroots movement, although our group also includes educators. I personally live in both worlds. I'm an educator and a parent of a child with dyslexia. And the movement was concerned with the limited access to educational interventions for dyslexia within the public education system. So DDRI supports students with dyslexia and their families by promoting evidence-based literacy practices in schools to help all students become fluent readers and writers. We raise awareness about dyslexia to support schools and to empower families. We are definitely here to help guide families through navigating and supporting their child's literacy needs. We share resources on the science of reading and evidence-based practices with Rhode Island Department of Education and policymakers. We also believe in building a stronger community between family and schools, and I hope tonight's presentation shows that we really are here to build bridges and work together to strengthen literacy for all students in Rhode Island. And we also support culturally responsive practices to promote instructional equity in schools. And on that note, I'm just going to make a quick plug that we definitely value diversity and equity. And if you're a family member watching tonight and you believe that you would like to join our movement, we are definitely looking to expand representation in our group. So please reach out and email us at the end. We'll have our contact information. Thank you.
So the first poll that we have okay, students with dyslexia can become effective readers and writers. True or false? I see a lot of responses. Okay, it looks like it's slowing down. Oh, no one's getting tricked by this, Shannon. I see a lot of truths here. And we'll end the poll. Can you share the results with us?
The answer is true. With evidence-based literacy practices and supports, and along with some accommodations and sometimes modifications, students with dyslexia can be effective readers and writers.
Excellent. All right, our next poll. True or false?
The next one is
Oops.
students with dyslexia need to try harder. Is that true or false?
Oh, Shannon, we've got a lot of folks that are familiar here. Oh, I think a lot of folks aren't getting tricked. Can we share the results?
So it's interesting. I bet you the people that said true, it's a matter of interpretation. So yes, there is more effort, but a lot of times there's this assumption made that kids just need to try harder. And it's a reflection of maybe a misunderstanding about the profile. So a lot of times families might hear this, or students might hear this from their teachers. They just have to put some more work into their effort into their work. And so we just want to say that these kids are already trying so hard. And so through tonight's webinar, we're hoping to help clarify misconceptions.
All right, and our third and last poll, True or false? Dyslexia is related to IQ. Okay, it looks like everyone's finished.
Good. I'm glad to see this. The answer here is false. Dyslexia is not related to IQ. And this is very important to realize that, you know, when we start to see students with any kind of decoding issues, and they need help no matter what their profile is. So it's very important to understand that dyslexia, actually, research has shown, is not related to IQ.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Nathan.
All right, so I'm just want to start us off with just defining dyslexia as a review, or new for new view. It might be new for new viewers. The state of Rhode Island uses the International Dyslexia Association's definition when they define dyslexia as a specific learning disability that is neurological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition, and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. And these difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. So a lot of times what you might end up seeing here is a gap between listening comprehension and the ability to read words on a page. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede the growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So this is dyslexia. Next slide, please. All right, so dyslexia mythbusters. Dyslexia is a brain-based issue that makes it hard to learn to read accurately and fluently. It's a lifelong condition. Kids don't outgrow dyslexia, but with the right support, key skills, they can improve. A common learning issue. Many people have it, and researchers have been studying it for over a century. So dyslexia is not. It is not a problem of intelligence. Kids with dyslexia are just as smart as their peers. It's not a problem of vision. The core issue involves understanding how the sounds in words are represented by letters. And it's not a problem of laziness. Kids with dyslexia are already trying hard. They need more help to make progress. All right, next slide, please. Okay, we're going to watch a series of videos. We're going to show a video that relates to a common theme that we typically have experienced as families of having children with dyslexia. So we're going to share a little video, and then we're going to respond to what the video was about. So let's start with our first video called Red Flags.
So early on, we noticed that our student was having trouble with keeping up in class, and even earlier than that, maybe delayed speech. He didn't speak until he was about 2. So when we started to notice a little bit of a difference in kindergarten and first grade, the teachers would tell us to just keep reading every night, keep trying, that basically he would catch up and grow out of it. And what we found was the way that we treated our other child, and we were doing all the same things, it just wasn't clicking. And we kept pushing for additional support in the reading and writing.
Always struggled in school. I didn't know it was specific reading. He had anxiety. I'd have to drag him in. But then he got into reading class in first grade, and I kind of trusted the school department to do what they do, and he struggled. He yelled, he screamed, but he stayed with it. And I think it was 6th grade, he was still struggling. They were still helping him. And one day he just came home and he wrote the word dad. And I had seen him write before, but it was like the higher power said, your child has dyslexia. And I just went into school and I was like, how could nobody know this for, like, I know it's my job too, but I trusted the school department to do what they do. And I went in and I threw a little hissy fit with the principal, who was amazing. And he knew that they had to get special reading teachers in there, and he did. And so now he's getting the help that he needed. But for 6 years, I knew he was struggling. I worked at the school. I knew he was getting help, but he was never getting the right help.
So first, we want to acknowledge that neurodiversity is something that shouldn't be viewed as negative. So when we say red flags, we mean that these are things parents often hear. And when they approach the school about these concerns about their child early learning literacy skills, parents or families should ask the teacher for the screening data. Every school now is screening our children, and you want to make sure that your child is screened in your home language. That's really important. Ask for the benchmarks for your grade that your child is in, and ask if your child are meeting those benchmarks. Families should ask the teacher if the child is receiving interventions or if they're receiving extra help within the classroom. It is important to let the school know if you have a family history of dyslexia, as it is genetic. We have a list of signs of dyslexia on our webpage that breaks down by age groups. The big takeaway from this video is to trust your gut. Document the signs you are seeing at home, which we list on our website, and then meet with your school and discuss your concerns. And I kind of think I jumped ahead from the question, sorry.
That's okay, Tori, because actually you did a rather good job answering it. Part two, I kind of had a compound question here, but I think what resonated with me is how do I know that the intervention, that it's the right help, that my child's getting the right help?
So again, the right help should be based on your child's diagnostic data. When we say diagnostic data, that's like the big term that we use in the school world that identifies your child's needs. That data is used to drive what type of intervention your child needs. It also drives the intensity, and that intervention should also be direct, explicit, and systematic, which we will talk about later in regards to the science of reading and structured literacy. We have a tab on our website that says Screening and Addressing Dyslexia, which has videos and documents to help support families through this process.
Thank you, Tori. That's very helpful.
There's a certain level of stress and anxiety that are put on these children that are expected to perform in the classroom like other kids, but they're not ready yet. So perhaps they haven't had the support or the structured reading intervention that they need. And what happens is they develop a great sense of shame because they are expected to maybe work in groups or read out loud in front of the class. And so teachers that show up with a level of compassion can really help these kids develop a sense of confidence. Great to see these kids build their confidence even later when they have the structured literacy support, and when they're getting that, they can really bring their ideas to paper. And that's really the goal, is to have them be able to do their writing assignments with confidence and show up in the classroom and be able to express. These kids are so creative and they have so many great ideas, but some of the challenge is the writing because of their language barrier. So when these evidence-based reading instruction is in place, we start to see them really flourish and thrive.
Finally met my tutor, and she began structured literacy with me in the multisensory approach of Orton Gillingham. My whole life changed. I started to go twice a week for 4 years, and I would never want to miss a session. I always loved reading. She would help me. It was like a new world for me, reading books that I never thought that I could read. Even as a adult, when I had to take college classes, she would sit down and read the books with me to make sure that I understood everything. And I am so grateful for her, because if it wasn't for her, then I would not be where I am today.
So Lise, what resonates with you about that clip?
Yeah, so as the mom of an 11th grader who's struggled with reading since kindergarten, what resonates with me is that students realize quickly that they're struggling to learn how to read. This can lead to stress and anxiety when students aren't able to keep up with their peers. If a student doesn't get the proper instruction, especially early on, this can lead to feelings of shame. The student starts to think somehow it's their fault. You know, they're not trying hard enough, as Shannon mentioned earlier. It's not their fault at all. Struggling readers need direct, explicit, and systematic instruction and lots of practice in order to improve their reading skills. Once a student does receive the proper instruction, they can start to see some success, and they feel empowered and no longer feel shame and start to build that confidence. I think Tiffany so eloquently put it in her video. You know, she never wanted to miss a session with her tutor. Once she was finally given the proper instruction, she said it was like a whole new world for her. She loved books, she loved to read. This is the power of structured literacy interventions for our kids. It's essential and critical for kids with dyslexia, but it is equally as necessary for all struggling readers. The sooner we can identify struggling readers and provide evidence-based instruction, the sooner our kids can start to build those reading skills, feel less anxious, build their confidence, and really start to engage in school, both academically and socially.
Thank you, Lise. Okay, we're ready for the next video.
School was not always easy for me. In high school, I would study for exams and I would fail. I would have index cards, I would study for hours, and when it came to that test, I would still fail. We had to read in school and I would pretend that I was reading, but I didn't understand the words. I always had a fun personality, so that's how I kind of got away with, being able to like, oh, I forgot my glasses, I can't read, can you read for me this time? It was junior year, my end of my junior year, that my mom was like, let's go get you tested. So I went to get tested and they found out that I was severely dyslexic, ADHD, and a processing disorder. When they told my mother that I needed a multisensory approach to reading, so when she finally found that tutor, the first day I met with her, she asked me if I ever felt stupid, if I ever felt not as smart as the other kids. And to me, that moment was the most powerful moment I remember, because that was what I was feeling. I was never as good as readers as my friends were. And that always made me just feel stupid. A teacher even called me stupid in high school because I was not able to read the math word problem.
So maybe Tori could answer this question. How does dyslexia impact students at the secondary level, and what can families do to advocate for their child?
I'll actually take this one just because I'm
Okay.
a secondary educator, and so I think this is so important. If there are teachers on here, or if your child is at the middle school or high school level, and I have two children in middle school, I think it's important to understand what this means at the secondary level. So we all agree that literacy plays a huge role in the everyday life of a secondary student. They read across subjects. They write essays. They answer complex questions. But what about students with dyslexia? How does this constant demand for literacy impact them? So many students with dyslexia come home exhausted, only to face the challenge of completing what might feel like a mountain of homework. This, as we heard, can lead to anxiety and even behavioral issues in school as these students try to avoid situations that cause them stress. While attendance is an important discussion in our state right now, we also need to consider that students who may be hesitant to come to school, that might be because of their literacy challenges too. Tiffany's experience for me highlights the issue of late identification. And schools often had missed a crucial window in the early grades, K-2, to prevent significant learning struggles. And the burden then falls on the student, and their self-esteem can then become destroyed in the process. And I think we agree that nobody wants that to happen. And we are hopeful, since the Right to Read training, that these discussions are really happening in very meaningful way. Look at this event tonight showing people trying to come together to say, how do we do better? So we do think that's important. And so hopefully these trainings will improve and help schools improve their systems of support to address these needs early on. So later on, we'll hear a little bit about MTSS systems. Secondary teachers, I have to say, need to play a vital role in understanding the characteristics of dyslexia so they can spot it in their classroom. So I like to tell teachers and parents who are listening tonight, you can look at our website for the signs, but I suggest look at their writing. A lot of the times at the older levels, their writing really gives some pretty significant signs, from spelling to other issues. When I think back to the video, I think it's heartbreaking when Tiffany described feeling stupid. Dyslexia is not a mystery, and there are proven solutions to address the literacy needs of these students. So let's create a learning environment where they don't have to feel this way. And I think this also should include educating peers about dyslexia, creating a very supportive environment. Sometimes, especially at the middle school level, kids can sometimes tease and make jokes, but those jokes are really painful for kids who have dyslexia. So just like everyone else said, structured literacy approaches have shown success. But schools are going to have to build that capacity to support diverse learners. And secondary schools too should have a method of screening and providing evidence-based interventions. And it's really important not just to rely on a computer program or piecemeal intervention. We really need that direct, explicit instruction because when that evidence-based instruction happens, these kids can thrive. And we want to say it's never too late at the secondary level because we need to make sure they get these literacy supports. Because another thing is that older students are preparing for driving tests. They're completing job applications. They're getting ready for SATs. Or now we have CTE programs, college and technology programs coming back. Some kids are going to have to pass certain kinds of certifications. So we can't allow students to be denied opportunities. So we want equity, and we're here tonight to really try and spread that word and get everyone to work together. It's a team effort, but there are solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Next slide. I'd like to introduce you to back to Trish Pora, who's going to tell us a little bit about how we're addressing dyslexia in Rhode Island. Next slide.
Thank you, Sue. So I want to start off by reiterating what Shannon shared earlier, which is structured literacy and science of reading are not new. That being said, up until the past several years, there was a stronger focus on the balanced literacy approach across the state, across education in general. The balanced literacy approach places an emphasis on independent reading. It doesn't have a clear map for phonics teaching skills. It utilizes leveled texts and encourages students to memorize words. Additionally, the balanced literacy approach uses a 3 cueing system in which students are encouraged to guess at words by looking at the first letter, the accompanying picture, or the sentence that they find the word in. The structured literacy approach, on the other hand, provides students with a more direct, explicit, and systematic literacy experience and instruction. The students receive instruction in phonology, sound symbol association. They learn about syllables, morphology, syntax, and semantics. Students are taught the rules, the patterns, and the structure of language. Decodable texts are utilized in teaching to support the learning of new phonics patterns, and assessments that are used that are evidence-based to identify students in need of support. And that data is then used to provide teachers with background on what the student needs, and instruction is able to be more aligned. The structured literacy approach benefits all students, but is absolutely critical for students with dyslexia. Can we go on to the next slide, please? How are we addressing dyslexia in Rhode Island? There are several pieces that are in place. Screening and benchmark assessments typically happen 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end, and they measure foundational reading skills and will target students that are struggling readers, need extra help, and provide some data and information to teachers to make sure those kids are able to get the help they need. Evidence-based literacy instruction is aligned to our high-quality instructional materials I spoke about earlier, and we are transitioning to those across the state. That brings me into MTSS, Special Ed and 504 plans. MTSS is a team, multi-tiered system of supports team of teachers. It could also include parents and other school staff, in which we look at student data, we look at student progress, and we make decisions around literacy interventions, time, intensity, practice. We set goals for students, and ultimately to help them become more successful and more proficient in literacy. Tied also into MTSS is the personal literacy plan that is created for students that are receiving an intervention. There's a goal, it outlines the type of intervention, what it looks like, who's providing the intervention. Those plans are always available for parents. Some LEAs and school districts send them home. Some have the classroom teachers address it in parent conferences or in communication with parents, and others simply send a letter that says your student is getting intervention. As a parent, you are always able to ask for that plan, and it will be provided to you, and you can also, engage in conversation about what it means and what it should look like.
In this next clip, we're just going to show the beginning segment, just the first 90. So when I say stop, we'll stop the video. But a lot of questions come to us, like, so we keep bringing this up, like, how do I know if my child is getting a structured literacy intervention? Thought this video was helpful. And again, as Tori mentioned earlier too, the data drives instruction, and different students have different needs. So even like older kids, for instance, they might need more work with multisyllabic words, whereas at the younger grades, they're still focusing on those initial sound and letter correspondences to learn to decode and read. So we'll watch the beginning of this clip, and then I'm just going to reiterate the elements of structured literacy intervention.
Inside a reading intervention. What helps struggling students learn how to read? Which techniques are especially helpful for kids with dyslexia? This video gives an inside look at a structured literacy intervention for grade schoolers and middle schoolers. 90-second overview.
A reading intervention is a very focused, intentional, instructional period of time where some data has pointed to the fact that a child, or in this case, the group of children, are struggling with some aspect of reading. And so we want to go deeper with what those aspects are. And we want to really teach explicitly those pieces of reading that they might struggle with. A reading intervention is different than getting a little extra help from a teacher because it will follow certain steps routinely so the student knows what those steps are. And it's a building block process where it might start with, you know, a sound and build to a single syllable word, and then it might build to a word that has more than one syllable, then it builds maybe to a phrase next or a sentence. It's this whole idea of sequenced, systematic, explicit instruction that is targeting specific skills. There's a lot of progress monitoring built in. We're checking in all the time to make sure the pacing is right, to make sure that the students are where we hope they will be, and taking into account what they need in terms of engagement and motivation, and then in terms of practice, how much practice do they need to be fluent and automatic in those skills.
Linking letters to sound.
We can actually stop it there. So inside a reading intervention, she went over, so we're hearing what explicit instruction is. Teachers clearly explain and model key skills and provide corrective feedback. The instruction is systematic. There is a well-organized sequence of instruction with important prerequisite skills also taught before more advanced skills. And that ties in a little bit to a cumulative practice where there's ongoing review. So prior learning is embedded in the new learning until these kids can become more automatic. And that's the struggle with dyslexia, is that automaticity. So getting that practice, lots of practice and feedback is essential to help them become fluent readers. So a red flag would be like a student's working with like a worksheet, and then you hear they just get put on a computer, or they now are just reading a book. That would not be systematic.
I know we just have a few more slides left, but I just want to remind the participants that if they have a question that they want to add, they can put into the chat to please do so. But I know, you know, we just have a few slides left, but I just want to remind folks that they can use the chat feature for some questions. Thanks.
No problem. And thanks for reminding me to slow it down. So how do we support dyslexic students in the classroom outside of just the interventions we were talking about? These are just great practices from elementary all the way to high school. Explicit instruction routines. This is when teachers engage in the I do modeling, lots of modeling of new learning. We do a guided practice. Let's do it together. And then you do. And that can be very fun and engaging. Sometimes there are misconceptions about that. Teachers can engage in interactive read alouds. They can provide students with audiobooks until they can become more fluent in their reading. And if there are digital resources given to students, screen readers can be very helpful. Another thing that can be challenging is note-taking, especially in the upper grades. So providing, I like to call guided notes. Sometimes these might be, if you have a slideshow, you might leave out key words, and that's what they're focusing on writing, those key vocabulary words or terms, instead of having to like write long amounts of notes. Although I know a lot of teachers have moved away from that, which is great. Review games, quick retrieval of facts can be a struggle for dyslexic students. So lots of review games to help them become more automatic with those terms, vocabulary words, facts. Dyslexia can impact math. So the use of manipulatives and visuals to help them conceptualize some of the math concepts can be very helpful, along with, I would say, explicit vocabulary, teaching them what the actual math terminology really means. I think it's very helpful to, at the older grades, to provide like a unit guide or an overview of where the whole unit is going, so they can see how each part fits into a whole. Because remember, with a lot of the language, they are having to process so much at one time that can create a lot of overload. So a unit guide can help the student really kind of understand how parts fit back to a bigger whole. And modifications may be needed. Sometimes it might be reduced amount of problems or written work, and that's a case-by-case scenario. So we hope that will be helpful too, to help parents understand ways that they can try and advocate for their students, or if you're a teacher listening, this could be helpful and inclusive practices. And if you note, like, this is probably helpful for many profiles. Okay. we can
Thank
go to
you,
the next slide.
Shannon.
Tori?
Yes. So what should parents do if they suspect their child is struggling in literacy? Again, I want to reiterate that you need to look at our website for what we are calling these red flags, the characteristics of dyslexia. Document them, write them down. Everything that you notice at home that the child is struggling with, or they're coming home and telling you that they're struggling with in school. Second, you want to communicate this, all these concerns that you're able to document. You want to contact your teacher and you want to express those concerns with them. Third, you want to request a meeting if it's necessary. You want to contact your school and find out how they initiate a meeting if you suspect your child has dyslexia and you want to engage into the IEP system. And RIPIN is a good source for that too, if you need help. Next slide, thank you. So communicating about literacy, we have two great resources right here with RIPIN. They have a dyslexia section in their resource area. I know that we're going to drop that link in. So there's a whole list of resources on the RIPIN page for dyslexia, and there is also a link that from there that will link you to the Department of Ed at RIDE, where they also have their information on dyslexia and the specific learning disability and the structured literacy as well. Next slide. So here we have some QR codes. Feel free to scan those. We also will have the links available to you. One is the Scan Me right there that says Decoding Dyslexia Rhode Island. That'll take you right to our webpage. We do have every month what's called our coffee talk. It is on the first Sunday of every month, and it's at 6 p.m. So we encourage everyone to register for that so we can send you the Zoom link. And each month we will have a topic to talk about, and obviously we'll have some time to talk about any concerns you might have as a parent and questions. Third, for teachers, we want to let you know on our webpage we have what's called the Science of Reading for teachers, and it's called Riser. And lastly, we have our Facebook group for families, and we also invite teachers to come as well. It's an inclusive environment where we can have just some group chats online. If you have questions, we're there to help and ask, anything that you might have, even after this discussion tonight. You can join our Facebook page or even just send us an email as well.
Tori, thank you so much. That's so much great information. We do have some questions in the chat that I'd like to share with the panel. I'm going to start with from Lee Gaspar asks, I am interested in an objective progress monitoring tool. My district uses STAR to benchmark, but I won't use it to progress monitor. And I would like an objective tool to monitor with?
I can chime in, and maybe RIDE can chime in as well. You know, STAR kind of gives a more global big picture, and typically if kids are flagging on STAR, that should be a sign to, okay, dig deeper. Now we got to look like what is impacting. A lot of times those like more global measures of comprehension. So there are free screeners out there, Dibbles, Acadians. They can kind of do more of that diagnostic and get at some of those patterns. And oral reading fluency is another really good measure to try and see if that progress is happening. And if RIDE, you guys want to chime in too. We have a lot of resources on our website. There is a screening and addressing dyslexia section on our website where we try to put a bunch of links there as well to explore. So I hope that helps. And I don't know if RIDE wants to chime in too.
We don't have any endorsed screening assessments or progress monitoring assessments at this point. I think, like Shannon said, utilizing Dibbles or oral reading fluencies. The PAST is another one. The PAST is a phonological assessment that would be useful if it's foundational literacy.
I could state too, like I work in Connecticut, and Connecticut does have a list of like approved screeners for their dyslexia laws. So sometimes it's just nice to see, you know, what's out there. But like anything else, do your due diligence, do your research on kind of the, you know, effectiveness of that screener. But like you have to say, like, what do I need to measure? So we got to measure, like have an inventory of those foundational skills, right? And then progress monitor through that intervention.
Thank you. Next question. Thank you for the wonderful talk. Could you please review the process of diagnosing process? Is it something, is it something that families need to go somewhere to have done, or can the diagnosis be done in schools?
So this is what I'm going to recommend is, according to the IDA law, schools are responsible. Schools can identify characteristics of dyslexia, and that can qualify you for an IEP. So if you kind of approach the school with that word diagnosis, their gut reaction sometimes might be, well, we don't diagnose. We're not allowed to do that. So you can go to the school and you can call for a meeting and suggest that you were concerned that your child has characteristics of dyslexia, and you would like to pursue some testing. You can do that through the school system. And you could always, if you're in disagreement, and RIPIN can kind of also help with this on the side a little bit, but if there is a disagreement after that initial meeting, you know, there is the ability to request an independent evaluation, which would then be outside evaluation. And then that data would be brought back to the meeting and for the team to decide. But schools, I think there was a lot of confusion around that word diagnosis, and that led to some breakdowns in this process. So schools are responsible for identifying characteristics of dyslexia, and that can qualify somebody based on the data for an IEP.
And just to remember that there's no one specific test for diagnosing or labeling a child with dyslexia. It's a component of multiple evaluations, which are covered under the educational evaluations that school districts do use, and schools are allowed to use the word dyslexia. So that's another information tidbit.
Well, and just on that note, dyslexia sometimes is referred to as specific learning disability in basic reading and/or fluency. So it means the same thing.
Thank you. Next question. Do you have examples or recommendations for appropriate goals to be included in an IEP? My second grader has recently been diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD, and we are in the IEP eligibility process. So maybe one basic example, something generic that
I'm going to recommend if on our website we put these resources. I even have we put a little webinar walking through the whole process too, about what the data says and how to develop goals. We have a few articles that give sample goals. Just remember that we want them to be SMART goals, that, you know, that they are measurable, and that they're using the right data. And remember, comprehension is an outcome. So, you know, we're trying to drill down to the area of specific need. And that's why those diagnostic tests are really important. And I think I just saw Carrie chimed in too about phonemic awareness testing, especially for children with dyslexia.
Thank you. Next question. How can a multi-language learner be supported if they have a learning disability? And who do I need to contact for additional supports for MLL students?
That's a
How
good
far
question.
behind does my, oh, this looks kind of like a compound. So let's stop there and then I'll finish the part 2.
Actually, Carrie, are you on?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on, and I think Emily's here too.
So Carrie's part of our
s-
DDRI group.
Step on up, Carrie. Thank
This
you.
is an
So good
area
to see
expertise.
you.
So I just saw her, so I thought we take the opportunity. Thank you, Carrie.
Well, if Emily Klein is here too, I'm sure that she will
Oh yes,
have
I forgot.
some things to say. I'll say for multilingual learners, we do want to include the same screening measures and diagnostic measures if they are showing that they are low in comprehension. They are just as likely to have some, you know, deficits in phonological processing, orthographic processing. And so you want to make sure that you're still gathering data on phoneme awareness, phonics, pseudo word reading, fluency, because they may show gaps and they may need support there. But you do always have to keep in mind that they should always have additional English language development supports. And that may compound their deficits in comprehension. And as was mentioned earlier, whenever possible, if there are screeners available in their home language, ensure that you are leveraging those supports because it'll give you a more accurate detail of whether this is, you know, the errors because of the fact that they are on a developmental continuum of learning a language or whether it's an underlying learning difference. Emily, did you want to contribute anything?
Sure. In terms of who to contact for additional supports, your school district would have an MLL director or an MLL coordinator. So there would be language support through that. And then any of our multilingual learners should also have access to multi-tier systems of supports and consideration for special education and related services as well.
Thank you. We have so much expertise in the room. This is one of the things I love about Rhode Island. We get to share resources and work together with so many folks. Next question, how far behind in reading does my child need to be to receive interventions such as a personal literacy plan?
So personal literacy plan is mandated if a student is a year or more below grade level. And that is determined by the district. It's typically determined based on your screening assessments. And students placed into an intervention have that personal literacy plan. Districts can choose to provide interventions if the student is less than a year below grade level. It depends on the district, it depends on the need of students, and there are varying tiers of intervention that can be provided. It starts off with a tier 2, which is less intensive than a tier 3, and as students show the need for intensive support, it increases. And vice versa. So they go through the process, they can be an intervention and they can also exit as they make progress.
Thank you. So we're just coming up at our hour. I can't believe this. Here we are. And you can see the contact information, Trish Pora at the Department of Education. Her email address is here. You can contact RIPIN. We have the email address and phone number, and Decoding Dyslexia RI. their email address, and of course, this recording will be sent out along with the resources that were provided. If we could go to the next slide. In addition to the recording and materials, everyone will receive a link to a survey that we ask you to fill out so that we can use that information to make changes and provide more information, workshops, webinars, and resources. I'd like to thank our ASL interpreters this evening for being here with us, our panel, and all of our guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.